I'm Bertram de Souza, the retired editorial page editor and Sunday columnist of the defunct Youngstown Vindicator and host of the Scribbler Publishing Group's podcast, streamed on WFMJ.com and the Scribbler Group's YouTube channel and Facebook page. On February 5th, I received an email from Dr. Jonathan DaSilva, who was featured in our podcast series called COVID-19, The Inside Stories. Dr. DaSilva had been waiting for a kidney transplant, but it was put on hold because of COVID, resulting in his being hooked up to a dialysis machine 6 to 8 hours a day. Shortly after the podcast aired, he underwent kidney transplant surgery that lasted more than 8 hours. Jonathan sent me a post-op email message that read in part, quote, "I'm peeing for the first time in a year and a half, and it feels great." I'm pleased that Dr. DaSilva, my second cousin, who is currently living with his parents in Mississauga, Canada, is with us today. Joining us in the conversation is Cynthia Rickard, my co-host, who has known Jonathan since he was a child. Cynthia also retired from the Vindicator after serving many years as an editor. Hi, Jonathan, and thank you for joining us again.
Hi.
Thank you so much for having me. It's good
Welcome
to see you.
back.
I must say you look good.
Thanks. I feel good. It's amazing.
Yeah, so before we go into a lot of the details, there were some complications after the surgery that you had. And so I was wondering if you could tell us what those were and what happened following the surgery.
Mm-hmm. So following the surgery, immediately I felt fantastic. You know, I was up and walking around and full of vim and vigor. And I mean, the doctors and the nurses were laughing because they were quite aware that it was the anesthetic still sort of kicking around my body. I was on this little sort of like apparently drug high for a little bit. And then the pain really started in. But I worked through that, and I was let go from the hospital after about 5 days, which was quite nice. But I got home and my wound started leaking. Like it was leaking after the surgery because they cut some of the lymph nodes. And so you get a little bit of fluid collecting around the organ. And that
did they mean to cut the lymph nodes? Was that?
Yeah. Oh. They do it all the time. Oh. They're like microscopic little vessels that, is just collateral damage. Oh. But they'll regrow and join. But mine just started leaking out of the wound. And over the course of the next, I guess, 2 weeks, I started getting a lot of pain and a lot of leakage. To the point where I had initially weaned down to only being on Tylenols for pain management. And I was slowly increasing the amount of morphine that I needed to use day after day. And so, everyone in my family, including myself, recognized that this wasn't right and something was going on. And then one morning I woke up and there was just this profuse amount of fluid leaking from the wound. And it started leaking through my clothes and onto the sheets. And so I called the hospital, and we just decided to go into emergency and have them have a look at it because something just wasn't feeling right. And what happened is that there was a little collection before when I left the hospital that they knew was the size of, let's say, a large marble.
Okay.
And so over those sort of, I guess, few days where that pain just really sort of shot up, it went from the size of a large marble to the size of my fist. And so it was pushing a little bit on the kidney and causing a lot of discomfort. But the other thing that they noticed on ultrasound is that I was retaining a little bit of urine in the kidney itself. And so usually the kidney produces urine and it goes through a tube down into the bladder and sits in the bladder. Now, because I hadn't peed for a year and a half, because my kidney was dead, my bladder shrunk down. And so suddenly I'm making all this urine and the bladder can't hold it. And so I was retaining urine in my kidney, and it was squeezing, like squishing the kidney literally. And so that was where some of that pain was coming from. And so we managed that in the hospital. I was in the hospital for 2 or 3 days. And then...
What did they do?
So, they did the ultrasound. There was a lot of questioning as to whether I need a drain, whether they need to do a biopsy, whether they need to open me up again. And then the surgeons and the kidney specialist team decided it was too much of a risk. With the amount of immunosuppression I was on, it was just too much of an effective risk for me. And so they would just watch and wait and see how I go. They were considering putting in a drain in the wound.
Right.
But after discussions, the surgeons and the transplant team just thought it would be too much of an infection risk. So they decided to sort of sit and wait and just see how things would play out. And so it did eventually get better. What they did was they just said, you know, the wound itself will just continue to leak until new vessels grow to reabsorb that fluid, or it either leaks out through the wound enough. And as for the urinary retention in the kidney, they said just, you know, try to empty your bladder every half hour throughout the day and night. So
wow.
Did your bladder, will your bladder stretch again to
it will,
its normal
and it
size?
has.
Oh, it has.
Definitely has.
Oh, so it's a short-term thing.
Yeah, it was definitely a short-term thing, but it's still not back to normal. So I'm still, you know, going to the bathroom probably every hour and a half to 2 hours. In the nighttime, I can probably go only 3 times as opposed to 7 or 8, which is, you know, a little bit better. But I figure it'll probably take another month to really sort of stretch out. And I don't want to push it too much because if I retain too much of my bladder, I don't want it going back up into the kidneys. So.
Jonathan, I'm interested about the length of time that you had to wait for the surgery. Is that a normal amount of time that someone would have to wait for a transplant because they couldn't find a match or something? Because I wasn't aware of the issues of bladder shrinkage, and would that cause the necessity to get a double transplant? Would some people have to get a bladder replacement as well?
No. So the bladder is a muscle organ, and so it'll shrink down if you don't use it, but then it will expand over time again. Okay. And so as long as you can, you know, use your bladder, it's relatively a fine thing that you can not use for a bit and then use again.
Oh, okay.
Whereas the kidney, because it isn't muscle at all, it's just highly specialized cells. Once it's gone, it's gone. There's no sort of capacity, and that's why you would need the transplant over that. Hey, bladder replacements would be maybe potentially for like cancer or something like that, something that's invasive in there.
Jonathan, did you have such complications after your first transplant 25 years ago? And the reason I'm asking is, I'm wondering whether being forced to wait a year and a half because of COVID and all of that, whether somehow or the other it affected your body and therefore made it more difficult this time around.
Well, the first time was really simple, I thought, in my head and from my perspective. You know, we planned it all out. My mother was donating. I got it done between second and third year university. And so in June, I got the transplant and I was back in university at the end of August. And I was up and ready to go. And I was a resident assistant and working and studying full time. This time, because of the delay, there were many issues. You know, I think I was supposed to get the transplant in March 2020. You know, and 2 weeks before the transplant, a week before the transplant, COVID came out and destroyed everything, all those plans. But because of that delay, I ended up being on immunosuppressants a lot longer than I would have been. And because of some of that interaction is why I got that pneumonia. And because of that, I was on high dose pred for, 8 months, 9 months. And that really messed around with my pancreas. And now because of that and being on pred as well for, 20 years from the first transplant, I have diabetes. So I'm now taking insulin and hyperglycemics, and I have to watch what I eat. And there are a lot of complications.
When did you develop diabetes?
So they noticed it this time around after the transplant. They noticed my sugars were just completely off, and it had never been an issue before. And prednisone is known to do that. If you're on long-term higher dose prednisone, it's known to really mess around with your sugars. So I may have gotten this, and our family is predisposed to things like diabetes. Yes. but there's no doubt that it wouldn't be as severe or pronounced if I didn't have that.
Okay, so you're back
pneumonia.
home now, in your parents' home. Last time we talked, you were in the basement, hooked up to the machine. Now you're not in the basement, but there's still danger, right? You're still sort of at risk of infection and all of that. So how is your life going? How are you managing your life in these circumstances?
It is nicer. I'm not sort of relegated to like the darkness of the basement with a machine as my only companion.
We should say that the basement is finished, by the way.
The basement is finished.
It's not like a cave.
I mean, it's carpeted and nice, and it is everything, but it is very isolating, and it's nice to be out and in the house again. So because I'm on such high doses of immunosuppressants because I developed these antibodies to my family's tissue, I have to be isolated for another 3 months post-transplant. So the risk of infection, really after this first month, it does drop down, but it is still significant for the next 3 months until they can wean me down off some of my immunosuppressants.
So what does isolation mean? Explain isolation to us.
So for me, it's essentially just staying in the house. We don't have visitors come over. I do have the nurse come in to they were coming in to change the dressing every day, but it's almost always the same nurse, and we have our pattern and we keep ourselves safe. Dad still limits how much he goes out, so he only really goes out for groceries.
Right.
Mom doesn't go out at all. I only go out to hospital appointments, and that's it. And so that's once a week before, and now it's once every 2 weeks, and that's it. Everything else is through Zoom, through video and phone, and that's my life until probably the middle or end of April. But I have a new kidney, so it's a new lease on life, and I don't mind doing this.
How are you feeling in general?
I feel good. Like, I have the energy. I'm back on the treadmill, which is nice. And I'm trying to lose some of this weight that I've put on from being hooked up to the dialysis machine 6 hours a day. My sleep is amazing. So before, I was probably working on 2-3 hours of sleep a night just because of insomnia associated with kidney disease, end-stage kidney disease. Now I'm sleeping solidly. I wake up and I feel refreshed. I can get out of bed and I'm not tired. I have the energy to study, to move around, to do all sorts of things. Like it's
like a new lease on life.
It's a new lease on life, and I feel like myself again, which is great. There is hope that I can pick up where I left off, and do the things that I want to do in life again,
Right.
Go back to my job and see my friends and continue making a difference in the world.
Can you be around your parents at all, or do you have to eat your meals alone, or do you?
So I can be around my parents, and they're usually quite good. Recently, so interestingly, my sister donated her kidney today, actually. So someone in my family needed to donate in order for me to pull from that
bank, right?
From that bank. And so my sister was the one who did it, and today she did it.
How is she
which
doing?
Is great. But she's great. She actually came out of theater about 3 hours ago, and so her husband's down there with her. And apparently she's doing quite well. The surgery was a great success, and there's no complications. So,
oh, good.
We'll see how she goes. She's got the magic pain button, so she's happy.
So she's doing great today.
Oh, she's doing great. Yeah.
How long is she going to be in the hospital?
Remember it tomorrow. But,
Right.
How long will she be in the hospital?
So they're expecting only 3 to 5 days.
Okay.
So it was all done through keyhole surgery, and apparently it minimizes the complications, minimizes the
That's
pain.
keyhole surgery is what we call arthroscopic surgery here, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's great. She's doing well. But because she came down with her family, I've been isolating in my room for the past few days. So I've had meals up here, no contact with any of them.
But you have a window.
I have a window. It's a big, beautiful window.
Yeah.
It's snowing outside. It's nice. It's lovely.
And you're talking to us.
Yeah.
I mean, my
Absolutely.
God.
Like it is. It's fine. And I'm studying my master's. I'm doing sort of that capstone unit in my master's. So I'm working on my master's project and just keeping myself busy. It's good. It's good to have the energy to do the things that I want to do again, you know? And so I don't mind being isolated. Like it's...
What have you heard from your colleagues and your friends in Australia?
Yes. So I talk to them a lot. They're all very excited. The countdown is on for me to go home.
I was just gonna, I wondered about that.
Yeah, it is really exciting. And so, you know, I'm planning on heading back there, hopefully, in end of September, early October.
Oh.
Back to a job there that's waiting for me, further training, and yeah, restarting my life there for a little bit.
We'll make it a point to see you before you leave for Australia. So we'll
I'll make it a point to see you after you're there.
So
you guys are more than welcome to come up. It'll be beautiful.
I'm itching to travel.
It'll be great.
So when I received your post-op email and read about your peeing, you know, I was instantly reminded of those of us who have prostate problems and we are forced to delay urination, and then when we finally get to go, it's such a pleasure. I'm serious.
Yeah. Yeah.
So tell me, because I was trying to understand this. Describe the sensation when you first peed. And I'm also knowing, when you're on a machine, do you know that your body is releasing the urine, or is there any sensation at all when you're hooked up to a dialysis machine?
So with the dialysis machine, I wasn't peeing at all, which is why I needed the dialysis, because all the fluid was just being retained.
Okay.
And so that was the only way we were getting rid of the fluid, through the dialysis.
So there's no sensation then?
There's no sensation. There's no sensation of peeing, because there's no peeing. There's nothing actually going into the bladder.
Okay.
Is there a risk of UTIs when that happens, since there's no fluids there?
No, not really.
No,
not really, because there's nothing sort of festering in the bladder, and the bladder should be sterile anyways, and yeah.
Okay.
So it should be okay, and you know, as long as there's also proper hygiene that's being done. With the first peeing I did, I still had the catheter in, but it was very exciting to see pee come out. Like, let me tell you, it was so exciting to see pee come out.
The little things in life give you joy.
I was just like, I was like, I took pictures, I showed my family, the nurses were excited. It was like a big celebration. And then when the catheter finally came out and I peed, I mean, there's a little bit of irritation because you're not used to peeing, and you had the catheter in there, and so the urethra is really sort of tender.
Yeah. But
you get that sensation of the bladder filling up, and you need to go, and you're like, what is this? I mean, it's been so long, it's almost unfamiliar, and then you realize what it is, and you get excited, and you make your way to the bathroom, and you sit down, and you really want to pee, and then the hesitation happens, because you're just like, is this going to happen? Is it not going to happen? Is it going to hurt? Is it not going to hurt? And then you pee, and it's not a huge amount of pee because your bladder's the size of a walnut, right? But like,
normally,
you know,
that's the normal size of a bladder?
Oh, no. For me.
Oh, for you. Okay.
For me. Yeah. But even with that, you know, first 10, 20 mils of pee that initially came out, it was just so exciting to see, like, my body working the way it works again.
Must be the way a child feels when they.
Well, it's almost like a sense of wonder, isn't it? You know, because you're just like, you haven't peed for so long. Your body hasn't been yours for so long, and slowly, bit by bit, you're reclaiming these functions that you know you took for granted forever.
Yeah, Jonathan, the 2 years that you had to wait were because of COVID, but for a normal transplant patient, what is the average wait time for a transplant?
So if you don't have a match and you're on the deceased donor waiting list, it can be anywhere from 10 to 12 years.
Oh my God.
Yeah. for kidneys.
So they would have to be on dialysis for 10 to 12 years before they got.
Potentially.
Wow.
Yeah. If you can match up with someone, like find a living donor to give to you, then you can get it done. Like, I was waiting a year, really, before the first transplant date. Because we had the donor, we had it all set up, we had the match. And so it was just finding out, getting through the screening process and setting up the theater times for all the people involved in the chain. Mm-hmm. But most people aren't that fortunate. And unfortunately, there's an incredibly short supply of kidneys. Despite there being a lot of people who are able to donate, most people don't think of it. People don't need 2 kidneys to survive. Most people.
And if it's a child, do they have to be size matched? So, for instance, if it were a child, they have to get a smaller kidney.
A smaller kidney, relatively, yeah. So for that, you're usually doing, with children, you're pulling from deceased children, unfortunately.
Have you become involved in the transplant movement? I mean, the donation movement for donors.
Little bits here and there. I've definitely talked to all my friends and family, and my family's talked to their friends, and I found that it is an intensely personal decision, though, and I don't fault anyone. Everyone has the right idea in mind, and everyone says, yes, we'd like to, but when push comes to shove, it is an intensely personal decision. And some people, they can't afford the time off. 2, they can't afford,
or they might be the sole breadwinner. Well, if they become a donor, would their insurance have to cover the medical expenses, or would the recipient's insurance cover it?
No, so because it's all covered here under public health care, generally it's all covered by the government. And there are funding schemes available to support those who do donate, for lost income, or medications required, or childcare that would be needed, things like that. But none of it is really well advertised, and once again, I think the knowledge isn't out there that people can survive with only 1 kidney, and so people are afraid.
Well, here I'm wondering, since my mom was essentially born with 1 kidney, her second kidney was pretty much shriveled and non-functioning from the time she was a child. So it has instilled a fear in me that if I were to donate a kidney and then my second kidney were to go bad, then I'm on the list. And I'm wondering if a lot of people don't wonder about that, especially people who are in families where there is a history of diabetes or some other disease affecting kidneys.
And that is absolutely legitimate and fair. Having said that, if there's histories of diabetes in your family, if there's history of anything that would affect the kidney, that would almost 100% rule you out as a donor.
Oh, would it? Oh.
Yeah. So Lizzie, thank God, she's really healthy and she takes very good care of herself. So the risk of her developing diabetes is minimal.
And we should say Lizzie is your sister that donated the kidney today.
25 years ago, your mother gave you 1 of her kidneys, and she's lived a full life. She's lived
a completely full life. Absolutely.
There haven't been any complications.
She's still with us, guys. So, let's not kill her off
prematurely. But she has. I mean, 25 years. She's not suffered anywhere. She's not, been restricted in living.
No, 100%.
Except for living with your dad.
Well, that. Yeah. No, they're both fantastic, and she's lived a completely full life. Like, she's gone to Kenya recently. She went to Israel recently. The mom and dad have both come visit me in Australia twice. She's out and about. It's not really stopping her from doing anything. And so there is that capability, and a lot of the people we talked to when we were looking for a donor, when we thought we were trying to get sort of an immediate match as opposed to with the chain, a lot of people said that, you know, they were happy to do it. They'll think about it. And then it just never comes. And that's, I mean, the sad truth is that you have to respect that decision. That means they're uncomfortable or, you know, for whatever reason, they can't make that a priority, which is fair, you know? And so.
Are there any kind of concerns? We're kidding around about your mom, but she has fared very well since she donated you a kidney. But are there things that she has to watch for? Are there any signs that a donor has to watch for after they've donated a kidney?
Not really. The kidney, as long as you're living a relatively healthy lifestyle, you should be fine. You know, as long as you're not having, you know, too much salt in your diet, you're not morbidly obese, you don't develop diabetes, you know, things like that, you should be able to live a full and healthy life. Lizzie, my sister, she's just turned 40, you know, and no lies, she just turned 38.
Oh, you're in trouble.
We can edit that out.
We will.
You're in trouble.
But, you know, she's going to live a full and healthy life for the rest of this.
Right.
And so there are no sort of real significant issues with that. Donation can be really easy. It can be really rewarding as well. So,
Jonathan, we have something in the States where they always ask you on your driver's license if you want to be a donor. So it's on there in the case that there's an accident and you don't survive it. Is there anything like that in Canada?
We do have that. And I think we have it on our driver's license. You have to put it, when you renew your driver's license or when you get your driver's license, you have to tick it off that you agree to be a donor. And so it's not an opt-out thing.
Yeah.
And so most people don't actually bother ticking it off. And that's one of the big discussions going on, I think, in the transplant and the donation community, because we don't have enough organs and people are dying because of this.
Well, let me just be clear. You're saying, so what's on the driver's license is that you will donate or you won't?
So you will donate,
but
you have to opt into that choice.
Oh, you do have to opt in. Okay.
You have to opt in. So you have to consciously make that decision to say, I will do it, as opposed to your organs could be considered for donation automatically, unless you consciously decide to opt out.
Right, okay.
And I think with the opt-out option, you know, I think we would resolve a lot of these issues, a lot of the organ donation crisis, and save a lot of lives. But it is a big debate.
Your surgery came in the midst of the so-called freedom convoy by truckers in Canada. It began as a protest against COVID vaccination mandates, but grew into an array of grievances. So while you were in the hospital, and I think you had completed your surgery, there was an attempt by some protesters to breach the lobby. So tell us about that. You know, so here you are. You know, you were recovering from surgery, right?
Recovering from surgery in the hospital, and the staff are wonderful there, but you could see the tension on their faces. A lot of them were being harassed on their way to work. A lot of them were being blockaded from coming into work. The hospital had sent out messages to the staff saying, "Don't come in your uniform because you will be targeted." And at one point, the hospital staff were told not even to go home, and the hospital booked a hotel for them close by so that they wouldn't have to deal with the protesters. But you could see that the fear and stress in their faces, and you know, they did an amazing job, but they shouldn't have to go through with that. And we were in our rooms, you know, all the patients in our rooms, we can hear the sirens, we can hear the chanting, we can hear the noise, and it's not, we didn't know what was going on. We didn't know whether we were safe, to what extent people were coming into the building, and goodness knows that, you know, the protesters came into the lobby, but had they wanted to go further, there's not enough security to stop them in the hospital, you know, and there are incredibly vulnerable people, not just the transplant patients, but there are HIV patients, there are geriatrics, there are neonatal, babies, all who are very, very vulnerable, and all who can pick up something that one of these people could bring into the hospital.
How were you feeling during all of that? I mean, how did that impact your recovery?
I was curious. I always have this sort of morbid curiosity about things like that. But I was worried for the staff, coming from a healthcare background, how stressful it is to begin with. And working on a transplant ward, it's especially stressful because you have a very vulnerable group of people. And you are essentially keeping them alive. Some are not doing well post-transplant, some are doing well. Everyone has the potential to get a life-threatening illness. And you have to walk through these crowds of anti-vaxxers every single day to get to work. And you don't know whether, as a staff member, you're going to be harassed, spat on, blockaded, attacked. You just don't know. And you could, some of the staff broke down crying, some of the staff just couldn't cope. And I don't blame them. And so my heart went out to them. You just try to keep them happy as much as possible.
Yeah, that's unnerving as a patient, I would imagine. When you're trying to heal yourself, and then those who are trying to help you heal are under duress.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And some of these patients had visitors coming in the hospital too, family support people that were coming in to help them get dressed or eat their meals or do things like that, and they would have to deal with these protesters as well. It wasn't fair. And it still baffles me why you would protest a hospital of all places, and as you were saying, Uncle Bertram, it started off as a freedom convoy. But my question is how much do you value freedom if you're oppressing the freedom of others?
Yeah.
If you're oppressing the freedom of the vulnerable, if you're oppressing the freedom of those helping the vulnerable, are you really actually worried about freedom, or are you just toting some tagline to boost your own gains? The whole thing was.
How long did it last? How many days was that going on?
So there were protesters there the entire time. And even now, there's still cops.
Oh, really?
Walking the streets downtown. Yeah. And patrolling the streets. Yeah. Wow. This is the most police presence I've seen in Toronto in ages. In ages, yeah.
Obviously, I have a lot of family in Canada and visited often. And I always had a sense, however, that Canadians were, as a people, more thoughtful than Americans. But I wonder what has happened where, and I understand protests. I understand going to Parliament, they're protesting in front of Parliament and all of that kind of stuff. I don't agree, blowing your horns all night and all of that. But to actually go to hospitals and blame healthcare workers, nurses, and doctors because they are doing what they're sworn to do, which is care for people. It just seems odd to me that would be happening.
I think and we touched on this last time, I think with the advent of social media and everyone becoming their own soapbox speaker, it is really difficult to find out accurate information, but it's also really easy to get confirmation bias for your beliefs. And so if you're disillusioned and you have this idea as to why you're disillusioned, that you've been wronged by the government, you can easily find many people who will agree with you. And then you develop your sense of community there.
And then the algorithms just keep pushing it.
Absolutely.
Pushing it and pushing it.
And unfortunately, in Canada, we've had a massive politicalization of this issue. You know, we've had one of the parties, the federal parties, come out in great support of these convoys.
Right.
And, you know, taking pictures with the leaders of these convoys who are now under arrest. And they refuse to take accountability for their actions. And so the protesters see this, and why should they take accountability for their actions, you know? And it becomes this very, I feel, individualistic, self-righteous movement that is sort of developing from the grassroots up, but being encouraged by, you know, some of the leaders. It's you know, we're seeing it in Canada, it's in the States, it's in Australia, it's in England, we're seeing it everywhere. It's I think as people get disillusioned, they're looking for a community to share their disillusionment with, because they don't feel like they're getting support from other people.
And the fallout from all of this is that people in healthcare are leaving in droves. Yeah. There are people, the doctors are resigning and getting out of retiring, nurses are stepping away. I mean, that's the effect of this.
Absolutely. Like it's unfortunate that healthcare is really going to suffer, and the problem is we're going to see this for decades to come. There is going to be a real lack of support from a staffing perspective in healthcare, because this won't fade from the memories of people for a while. You know, healthcare workers being attacked, healthcare workers being spat on.
Right.
It is not a safe industry anymore. And unfortunately, some of the policies from the government have come just a little bit too late. You know, and
well,
so
I think a lot of it is COVID fatigue too. I mean,
a lot of it is COVID fatigue,
you know,
and that is fair. That is 100% fair. But I guess at the same time, and this is just my perspective, we're all fatigued.
Yeah.
Right.
But, you know, I don't see you guys going out and spitting on people, attacking people. I don't go out spitting on people, attacking people. There are ways to manage this stress. There are ways to manage the fatigue, and some of them need to be funded more by the government, which they haven't been. You know, mental health funding is at an all-time low. And only now we're seeing sort of the repercussions of that. But some of it is also, I think, a general lack of accountability for your own actions. As a society, we feel that we're entitled to do whatever we want, and we should be able to do whatever we want with no repercussions or no responsibility attached to that action. And it's I think COVID has really put a strain on society. And I think it in some ways has brought out the worst. In some ways it has brought out the best. But it has definitely shown the cracks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And unfortunately too, you can't reason with these anti-vaxxers. I mean, they don't want to hear, you know, here you are, a doctor, a physician, you are in the profession. I mean, there is no bias as far as telling people, here's how to live a healthy life.
Yeah.
And yet they don't hear that.
No, but, and that is, I mean, it's frustrating, and it's, I mean, for me, I guess the argument that I'm understanding from them is that either they don't feel COVID exists, so it's a big scam and a conspiracy, or they just feel the restrictions are too restrictive. You know, they're too oppressive, and it is not destroying their way of life, but impacting negatively on their way of life.
Yeah, I think that's especially true for families too, who have had to deal with children missing school or having to be masked in school, or them having to give up their jobs because their kids can't go to school. You know, it's just, I mean, the whole impact has affected everyone, I think, in a much greater way than we've ever seen it in our lifetimes.
100%, and I think in a greater way than any of us ever expected.
Yeah.
When it started.
Yeah.
But with regards to sort of, you know, not sort of, I guess, understanding where everyone else is coming from and sort of sticking only to their mindset. I, you know, they're disappointed. They're disappointed with the government. They're disappointed with the restrictions. They're disappointed with COVID. I don't blame them for that. That's fair. That is valid. And that's 100% real. And that's okay. But then the issue I think I have is that accept the consequences of your actions then. Don't wear a mask, and that's fine. That's okay. But then don't endanger other people by doing that, you know?
How is it going to be for you when you go back to Australia? I mean, that's a very far distance for you to be away from your doctors and the facility where you had the transplant. Do you feel confident that you can go back to that and still get the care if there's an emergency situation?
100%, 100%. So what happened last time when I moved to Australia is that my transplant kidney specialist had a colleague in Australia and referred me to them. And so I met up with them and became part of that transplant network over there. And so the same thing will happen when I go back this time. So I'm going to probably move to Melbourne for more specialist training. I'm going to leave general practice, move into sort of sexual health medicine, just because it's less coughs and colds and safer for me. But I'll probably connect with a transplant specialist at the Royal Melbourne Hospital and become part of that transplant network there. And so if there's any further care I need, any sort of special support, I can get it through there.
Oh, that's good.
So are you going to be constantly now for the rest of your life on medications and stuff like that? Is that what happens?
Absolutely, 100%. So I think some of it will wean down over the next couple of months, but I would say probably after 4 or 5 months post-surgery, I'm going to be on a specific regime, and it'll just stay that way until this kidney fails.
Jonathan, we hear about, you keep talking about these anti-suppressant, the immunosuppressant drugs that you have to take. Is that the prednisone, or is that something else?
So prednisone is an immunosuppressant. It dampens down the immune system, but I'm on other very specific ones. So one is called Myfortic, and the other is called Advigraph.
And are those steroids as well, or the?
No. So those are they're different types of medications. The prednisone is the steroid specific one, and that just gives a general dampen down of my entire immune system, whereas the Myfortic and the Advigraph are very specific for immune cells.
No.
And so
years ago, I covered the first heart transplant patient in this area, and obviously it was just at the beginning, and like within a year he had gained, I don't know, 100 or more pounds, and I know the drugs have been changed and improved since then, but what kind of effect do those immunosuppressant drugs have on on the body?
So the prednisone is infamous for thinning out your bones, thinning out your skin, causing cataracts, glaucoma, hypertension, diabetes. I mean, it sounds quite horrible.
Yeah.
But once again, you know, thanks in part to prednisone, I've had an extra 23 years of life that I wouldn't have had.
Yeah.
You know, the other immunosuppressants some of them can raise your cholesterol a little bit. Some will delay healing of wounds. Some definitely make you more susceptible to more infections, things like that. So, you know, with the combined immunosuppression that I have, the 2 plus the prednisone, you know, my risk of cancer, colon cancer increases, my risk of skin cancer increases, my risk of diabetes, well, that's here, my risk of heart attacks and strokes increases. I already have osteoporosis. I already have osteopenia in some places. Yeah, so
you take medications probably to counter that, other medications to counter that then.
So we'll be starting the osteoporosis medications probably in a couple of months once the immunosuppression medication settles down. But it's, you know, it's par for the course.
Yeah.
So
I
You made the statement, though, that you will be on this medication and all of that until your kidney fails again.
Yeah, yeah.
So how many more years, so what's the lifespan of a kidney that?
So now, when I first got my kidney, it was about 12 to 15 years. Now it's about 15 to 20, depending on the quality of the match and whether it's a live donor or a deceased donor. Deceased donors have less time, less, I guess, time.
Oh, really?
Probably the best word. Yeah.
Why is that?
Yeah, so I think because they are deceased and they're not necessarily always the best match. Because if you can get a quality good live match, that's fantastic. The deceased ones are usually just first come first serve. If you need it, they pop it in. Is my understanding. I figured this one, if I can get another 20 years out of this, that'd be great. That'd be amazing.
How old will you be then? How old will you be in 20 years?
62.
Oh, okay.
And and will you still be eligible for a third transplant then? You will be.
Yeah, I would think so. I would hope so.
Is there yeah, we hope so too, but is there an age cutoff for transplants?
No, we were looking at it the other day, and the oldest transplant was at, I think someone was 99.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know when that was done or where that was done.
Wow.
But you know, there are people. My dad had patients who were in their 70s who were getting transplants. You know, I think if the body is good and you can handle the transplant, and the prognosis would indicate that you would have a good lifespan afterwards, then why would
then you're eligible?
You not get one?
Yeah.
Yeah. Why would you not be eligible?
Jonathan, do you know who your donor was?
No.
You don't. Would you?
No.
Would you want to know? I don't know if those are open or closed now, or if you have to sign contracts to say.
No, it's absolutely confidential.
Is it?
So I'm not given any information with regards to who it is or how old they are, their gender, their location, anything like that.
Are you given their medical history at all?
No.
Nothing.
I mean, there's certain aspects that I'm allowed to know. So if they were Hep C positive, if they were HIV positive, if they were cytomegalovirus or Epstein-Barr virus positive, because that affects my quality of life afterwards. And so I need to accept those risks or not. But anything else is not told to me. But through the coordinator, we can write letters of thank you.
Oh, you
or
can.
letters of gratitude. Oh. And so my parents and I all did that. And so hopefully they've received it, and yeah, just know what a difference they've made. Apparently my donor was just a random donor who said they wanted to donate a kidney.
Wow.
So yeah.
So let's at what point, so the next several weeks are going to be key, and then at what point will you be able to actually begin to socialize with people and not be worried? And when
well, fortunately, the timing works out really well. So my birthday's in April, my nephew's birthday is in April, and my two brother-in-law's birthdays are in April. So I think we're going to try and get together for Easter weekend, all of us, and have a massive Easter at Catherine's place in Aurelia, but then have like a quadruple birthday as well. And that will be, I think, the first time I get to sort of go out and be social.
Yeah,
that'll be fun.
So you'll be taking video, obviously, and then if you would send them to us, like you've been doing, we can post it as part of this ongoing story. Which,
I'm happy. Yeah, I'll be happy to take videos of me socializing for the first time.
I know. Listen, we've come to the end of the hour, and it has been fascinating. But mostly, you know, we truly appreciate the time you've given us. You're sharing your life story with us. You know, the trials and tribulations, and you know, we'll be in touch. We wish you all the best. You know, give our love to your Dad and Mom and the rest of the family, and you know, please let us know if there's anything we can do. So,
yeah. I just have one final question. Do you have any advice for others who are going through kidney failure or waiting a transplant?
I think the best advice I can give is take it a day at a time. You'll get there. The road seems long and it seems daunting, but you will get there. And you know, it's a tunnel. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. You may not be able to see it, but if you just keep putting one foot in front of the other, you'll get there, and you'll feel better than you can ever remember. And it's worth it.
Just persevere.
Just persevere. It is worth it no matter what. And, you know, reach out for support if you need it. There are supports out there. There's family, there's friends. You know, they can email me if they need, you know,
right,
some support, you know, but it is manageable, it is doable. And so just keep putting that one foot in front of the other, and it'll be great.
Well, thanks very much. We're so happy to see that you've come through this so well.
Thank you.
And you're looking
Thank you.
good, too.
I'm happy to be here. It's good. It's good to feel myself again.
Yeah.
So
we'll be in touch.
Okay.
Take care, Jonathan.
Take care, Jonathan.
See you guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Yeah.
Once again, we would like to thank Dr. Jonathan DaSilva for sharing with us the trials, tribulations, and success of his kidney transplant surgery. For those of you who continue to believe that COVID is no worse than the flu and that vaccinations are unnecessary, we would urge you to watch our series COVID-19, The Inside Stories. It provides first-person testimonials from individuals on the front lines of the pandemic.
You can watch the Scribbler Publishing Group's podcasts on WFMJ.com, the Scribbler Group's YouTube channel, and Facebook. Please hit the like and the subscribe buttons on the YouTube page so we can continue to bring you these compelling podcasts on the issues of the day. We thank Robert McFerrin of the Triad Production Group, a division of 21 WFMJ, who produces the podcast, and Andy Kunkel, our technical wizard and a staff member of Triad Production. I'm Cynthia Rickard.
And I'm Bertram de Souza, wishing you happy viewing.